Hey folks, this is Jesse Cope back with another episode of the American Soul Podcast. Hope y'all are doing well wherever y'all are and whatever part of the day it is for y'all. I appreciate y'all joining me, giving me a little bit of your time. I know how precious that is, and I do my best here to try and make sure that I use it wisely. And for those of y'all that continue to share the podcast and to help it grow, seems like almost daily, but certainly week after week, I'm incredibly grateful and humbled by that. So thank y'all so much. We're gonna go for a little walk down our dirt road. Sun is out, temperatures are climbing. Have two little girls out here sitting with me, and had a puppy dog, but the puppy dog went away, and the birds have not discovered us out here yet. So we may hear them at some point. No kitty cats, but we'll press on, do the best we can. We're going to go back today to the second book in the trilogy, the Churchill biography written by Manchester, that we've talked about a couple times. And I'm going to read a couple excerpts from that and tie that into something that happened this week, which y'all are probably familiar with. And it sadly ties in real well to what the podcast was going to be about today. And if you're not aware of it, then you need to be. So I'm going to go through here and we're going to read just a few, not a lot, folks. In Parliament, Churchill continued to urge revision of Versailles, but vehemently opposed the rearming of Germany, warning that accepting equality of armaments would be almost to appoint the day for another European war, to fix it as if it were a prize fight. Sounding the alarm even before Hitler moved into the chancellery, he wrote in the Daily Mail on October the 17th, 1932, that General Schleider had already declared that whatever the powers, the Allies, may settle, Germany will do what she thinks fit in rearmament. Very grave dangers lie along these paths, and if Great Britain encouraged Germany in such adventures, we might, in an incredibly short space of time, be plunged into the situation of violent peril. He told the House, "Now, the demand is that Germany should be allowed to rearm. Do not delude yourselves. Do not let His Majesty's government believe, I am sure they do not believe, that all that Germany is asking for is equal status. That is not what Germany is seeking. All these bands of sturdy Teutonic youths marching through the streets and roads of Germany with the light of desire in their eyes are not looking for status. They are looking for weapons." A couple points here, folks, and then I'll keep reading. Churchill already knew there was no reconciliation, and he was trying to tell people, even in the early 30s, look, this Nazi party, the Nationalist Socialist movement, and you notice here he's talking about, he doesn't just focus on Hitler, he focuses on the youth, the citizenry, the number of people supporting this socialist movement, these Nazis. He said they're not looking for equal status. They're looking for total power and control. They're looking to crush their opponents. They're looking for weapons. And this is going to be important in a minute. I'm going to tie this into this week, but he already knew that there was no appeasement. There was no reconciliation with the Nazis. That just was not on the table. And if I get to all of it, I will. There's a little vignette in here. I don't know if I'm going to have time to read it. Churchill was pretty much alone on this, and often was mocked and ridiculed and just scorned, just laughed at because of his stance. And it's hard to look back and see that from today, but the intellectuals, the academics in Britain at that time, they just disdained his statements that if they allowed Germany to rearm, that we were headed toward a war. Perhaps nothing underscores the difference between German and British moods in the early 1930s so starkly as the political activities of their university undergraduates. In Oxford, they were vowing never to fight, even in defense of England. While in Heidelberg, H.R. Knickerbocker of the New York Evening Post found nearly 3 out of every 4 students were dues-paying Nazis. A German historian points out that Heidelberg, like Oxford, had preserved its traditionalist, socially exclusive structure, but that the German youths from privileged families were suppressing student groups supporting the Republic in Berlin by a powerful union of nationalist, Volkisch-oriented, and above all, dueling fraternities. You see this today. We're going to tie this in a minute, but so the tie-in here, folks, is, and I'm going to get there. I'm going to make this point, but I'm going to go ahead and give you the end. There's not that much difference in goal between the modern American left and the Socialist Nazi Party of the early 1930s. This is not about equality. This is about power and rule, and this is not, there's no place for appeasement. We've been trying to do it for decades. The live and let live philosophy, the silent majority commentary, well, it hasn't worked. You can't appease evil. You can't negotiate with the devil. You can't meet in the middle with the devil. And the stances today, not on everything, folks. There's compromise politically on a number of issues, but there's a core set of values, as President Coolidge said. I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but if the principles of Christianity failed in this country, he said this back in the 1920s, I believe, failed to be basically universal across the nation, the republic couldn't survive. Well, those principles are they're no longer universal. And not only are they no longer universal, but there's a stark divide between citizens who stand for our republic's founding faith and principles on these core issues and those that stand for the evil values of the godless left. And that divide, that no amount of appeasement is going to heal that divide, is going to bridge that gap. It's like Reagan's commentary about strength through peace. There was no compromise with the communists that was going to bridge that gap. One side or the other was going to win that Cold War. It was just a matter of which side. Churchill knew one side or the other was going to end up in power, in control. Now, if Britain and the Allies kept Germany in check, then that would give freedom to other countries to run the way that they wanted to run. That was the great thing about the Allies side. But if Germany was allowed to take control, there would be no dissenting opinions. There would be no freedom, no liberty. And that's the same thing you see with the left, this woke culture. I never have liked that word, by the way, but it's so commonplace now that I'm going to use it because I'm assuming most of y'all know what I'm talking about. This woke culture. You know, they're not looking for equality or the status that Manchester was talking about. They're looking for domination. You either agree with their opinion on race, on gender, on class, on economic policy, on foreign policy, or you will be silenced, censored, harassed, controlled, run out of a job. Take your pick. And of course, what does that turn into? Well, that turns into what we see in Mao's China and Stalinist Russia, and here in Nazi Germany, that turns into torture, turns into rape, turns into arrest, political imprisonment. There's a little line from earlier in this biography. I'm going to read it real quick. Hitler, in effect, exiled German intellectual life. During his first year in power, he drove 1,600 scholars out of the country, including a quarter of the Heidelberg faculty and 5 Nobel laureates. Do we not see that today as well from the left? Do we not see that anybody in education for decades that has held a different opinion has been run out? We've seen coaches that refused not to pray run out. We've seen teachers that refuse to abide by the bigotry of critical race theory run out. We've seen teachers that refuse to abide by the absurdity of the LGBTQ movement, the actual more than absurdity, the evil, the hurtfulness to the children run out. Again and again and again, we see this. Same parallel, folks. Same parallel. Hitler ran over 1,000 professors in his first year of power out. It was just kind of ironic, right? Because where do we always start? Education and culture, which I say so often, regardless of if we get into a real civil war, which I think is coming. I think just like Hitler realized that if we kept allowing the Nazis to rearm, we were setting the date for another European war very quickly. We have been for decades slowly and perhaps now more quickly been setting a date for another civil war because these two sides don't reconcile. It's like oil and water. They simply won't mix. You can't have someone that stands for our founding republics, our republic's founding principles based on Christ, and somebody that stands against them. You can't have those two sides in America and expect America to survive peacefully. It just won't happen. And so again, going back to this quote that, in Germany, nearly 3 out of every 4 students were dues paying Nazis, and that these groups were suppressing the ones that were trying to defend the German Republic at that time. We see that again today. The drift, going back to this biography, the drift in academia and intellectual community was of profound significance. In Germany, as in England, most undergraduates came from upper-class families. Because their commitment to the nationalist socialism was often decisive in determining parental commitment, the trend toward, and I can't pronounce that German word, but toward the Nazi Party, toward socialism, enlisted the lives, the fortunes, and the sacred honor of the country's traditional ruling oligarchs, including their children who would inherit tomorrow's Germany. Meantime, the Oxford Union's resolution that it would go in no circumstances to fight for king or country had aroused Churchill's wrath. He called it an abject, squalid, shameless avowal, a very disquieting and disgusting symptom. Its impact abroad, he said, would be disastrous. He thought of Germany, with its splendid, clear-eyed youth marching forward, burning to suffer and die for their fatherland, and of Italy, with her ardent fascisti. He said, one can almost feel the curl of contempt upon the lips of the manhood of all these peoples when they read the message sent out by Oxford University in the name of young England. You see this again today from the left, folks. You see when no circumstances fight for king and country, the translation there, we're going to kneel for the national anthem. We're going to turn our backs on the flag and the anthem because of this joke of systemic racism and oppression based on the color of skin or the gender. You don't know racism and oppression in America today. Go to Afghanistan, go to Iraq, go to some of these other countries around the world. Then you'll see systemic oppression and racism, bigotry. So the tie-in here again is we see this every time. You see from the left this just total disdain for our country. And if they do talk about our country positively, then it's in order to get something out of the deal, in order to pretend that they're really standing for the true values of the country, when in fact they're doing the exact opposite. Read you one last little bit, and then we'll move on for the day, folks. Churchill had gone to this, I'm going to give you a preface. Churchill had gone to this collegiate event where it's a question and answer session, and really got quite humiliated and by this group of students who just disdained as I said earlier, his view on the Nazis. Later in this discussion, after the Germans' departure, there was one German student there. Churchill declared British rearmament essential for us to be safe in our island home. And the audience, to his surprise and consternation, burst into laughter. He repeated the phrase, and the laughter grew so raucous and so prolonged that he could not continue. A half-century later, their mirth seems incomprehensible. Yet how could a generation informed by Journey's End and all quiet on the Western Front have responded differently? They believed that Churchill was crying wolf, and they knew his alarm was groundless. As the new year arrived, a catchy tune from Walt Disney's Three Little Pigs was on everyone's lips. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf, big bad wolf, big bad wolf? Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Tra la 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 la. Folks, we're headed toward a civil war. And here's the tie-in with this week if you don't know it. There was a leak on a Supreme Court decision, unprecedented in modern history. As far as I know, there's never been a leak of a Supreme Court decision. And it leaked that there was a 5-4 majority opinion overturning Roe v. Wade. And the left has lost their collective mind. They are upset. Make no mistake. Be real clear about this. They are furious and vowing not to obey anything out of the Supreme Court, which really should have been done back with separation of church and state. But in this case, they're furious about the idea that a woman can't rip apart her own baby inside of her. That's what they're mad about. They're mad about that we would possibly no longer, because the Supreme Court would probably kick it back to the states, no longer be able to rip apart defenseless babies in a mother's womb because they were a burden or an inconvenience. You need to really hear that, folks. There's no reconciliation or coexistence with people like that. And I'm not talking about Biden or Pelosi or these Supreme Court justices. I'm talking about on the local level in our communities, in our states, in our schools. You can't have somebody that says, I stand for life, and somebody that says, I stand for the ability for a mother to rip apart her own baby. Where's the middle ground there? Where's the coexistence? It isn't there. It's non-existent. You take those core issues of the left, rejection of God out of the public life of a Christian nation, abortion, murdering babies, LGBTQ relationships and feminism, which take the roles and responsibilities and definition of marriage and sex for men and women from God, and completely turn it on its head, reject it, say men can be women, women can be men, men can sleep with women, or men and women can sleep with women, and that's all good, right? Illegal immigration, flooding the country with criminals and terrorists, regardless of completely ignoring rule of law, defund the police, the whole 9 yards, the bigotry of Black Lives Matter, critical race theory in education, the revisionist history pretending that America has always been systematically racist and oppressive in principle, not talking about action, and the support of socialism and communism, which over the last century have slaughtered tens of millions. You can't take people that stand for those values and then on the other side, people that stand for sanctity of life, people that stand for our republic's founding faith and principles based on the teachings of Christ, for God being just entwined in our public life and public policy, people that stand for law and order, for secure borders, people that stand for the sanctity of marriage, for men being men and women being women. You can't you can't have people that stand for freedom and liberty, as we've talked about before, where the Spirit of God is. You can't have those two sides. There's no bridge there. There's no path to gap those two. Churchill knew that about the Nazi Party. You see how he always focused in all these quotes that we read today. I don't even know if he ever mentioned Hitler, and I'm sure he did, folks. I know he did in his speeches. I'm sure he did, but he focused on the citizenry, the movement of the German people as a whole. He knew there was no reconciliation with people that were headed that direction. There was no appeasement of them. We have been slow stepping toward a civil war for almost 80 years now, and it's picked up a little bit lately. But make no mistake, folks, sooner or later, we're going to get to that point where one side or the other has to win. One side or the other has to come out on top. You just can't have those core values coexist when they're diametrically opposed. And I'm sure even on this podcast that some of y'all are listening right now and going, oh, he's just crying wolf. My alarm is groundless. It's baseless, melodramatic. Cope's just overreacting. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And all I can think is this last line in this biography, Walt Disney's Three Little Pigs. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? The big bad wolf. Tra la 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 la. Who's afraid of the big bad? I am. And we sure ought to be. I'll leave y'all with it. God bless y'all. God bless your families. God bless America. We will talk to y'all again real soon. I look forward to it always, folks.